World War II. While images of soldier keepers, and some even came from aristocracy, guilds often come to mind, there was another often overlooked aspect of the war espionage. Thousands of women, driven by patriotism, a thirst for adventure, or a burning desire to fight injustice, took on dangerous roles as secret agents. They traded traditional roles for lives shrouded in secrecy, becoming invisible weapons in the fight against tyranny. These women came from all walks of life. Some were teachers, others were shopkeepers, and some even came from aristocracy. They became masters of disguise, skilled in the art of deception, operating undercover, often in enemy territory, gathering intelligence, transmitting vital information, and sabotaging the enemy from within. Their missions were fraught with danger. Every day was a sabotage that disrupted enemy operations. They lived double lives, constantly aware that one wrong move, one slip of the tongue, could have fatal consequences. These women were trained in hand-to-hand combat, weapons handling, and cryptography. They parachuted into occupied territory, navigated treacherous landscapes, and blended into enemy populations. They established resistance networks, smuggled weapons and supplies, and carried out acts of sabotage that disrupted enemy operations. Their bravery and ingenuity played a crucial role in turning the tide of the war. The risks were ever present, and for many, capture became a terrifying reality. The Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, were notorious for their ruthlessness. Women spies, seen as doubly dangerous, traitors to their gender and their nation, were often subjected to even more brutal treatment. Sleep deprivation, beatings, and torture were commonplace. Many were sent to concentration camps, facing unimaginable horrors within those walls. Yet, even in the face of such adversity, their spirits remained unbroken. They clung to hope, to the belief that their sacrifices would help bring about a better future. Their stories are tales of incredible bravery, resilience, and unwavering dedication to a cause greater than themselves. They were the silent heroes, their contributions often overlooked or downplayed. Their intelligence shortened the conflict, saving countless lives. For every successful mission, a chilling fear lingered. These were the nightmares that haunted their waking threat of capture. They knew that falling into enemy hands meant facing a fate far worse than death on the battlefield. The very nature of their work made them prime targets for the enemy's wrath. Capture often came suddenly, shattering the delicate facade of their assumed identities. The knock on the door in the dead of night, the abrupt arrest on a crowded street, the cold, calculating eyes of the Gestapo, these were the nightmares that haunted their waking hours. The Gestapo, infamous for their brutality and efficiency, had honed interrogation into a dark art. Their headquarters, often housed in imposing buildings that had once been symbols of authority and justice, became places of unspeakable horror. Captured spies were often isolated, stripped of their identities, and reduced to numbers. The psychological torment began even before the physical torture, designed to break their spirit and erode their resistance. Interrogations were unpredictable, could erupt at any moment, shattering the monotonous silence. The Gestapo's methods were as varied as they were cruel: thumbscrews, leg irons, and whips, each one designed of their captives. Sleep deprivation was a common tactic, keeping prisoners awake for days on end, their minds teetering on the edge of delirium. Beatings were routine, delivered with fists, boots, and rubber truncheons that left no visible marks but inflicted excruciating pain. The screams of the tortured echoed through the corridors, a chilling symphony of suffering. They employed a horrifying array of torture devices: thumbscrews, leg irons, and whips, each one designed to inflict unimaginable agony. For these women, their gender offered no protection from the breaking the will of their victims, were often met with an in its most degrading forms, was used as a weapon to humiliate, to break their spirit, to punish them for daring to challenge the Nazi regime. The scars left by such brutality ran deep, both physical and psychological. But even in the face of such unimaginable horror, their courage shone through. They clung to their secrets, refusing to betray their comrades or their cause. The Gestapo, accustomed to breaking the will of their victims, were often met with an unexpected resilience from these women. The torture wasn't random, it was calculated, designed the difference between life and death for their fellow spies. Skilled interrogators knew how to exploit weaknesses, how to play on fears, how to turn pain into a bargaining chip. They offered their victims a glimpse of hope, a promise of leniency, of release, in exchange for cooperation. But for many of these women, betraying their beliefs, their comrades, was a price too high to pay. They endured the pain, the humiliation, the relentless pressure, knowing that their silence could mean the difference between life and death for their fellow spies. Many died under torture, their bodies broken, their spirits unbroken. For those who survived the Gestapo's initial interrogations of the Nazi regime, the sight that greeted them to trains, packed into cattle cars like animals, their destinations unknown. The journey itself was an ordeal. Cramped conditions, lack of food and water, and the ever-present stench of fear and despair made the hours stretch into an eternity. For many of these women, the final destination was Ravensbrück, a concentration camp in northern Germany, specifically designed to house women deemed enemies of the Nazi regime. The sight that greeted them upon arrival was one of utter desolation. Ravensbrück was a place where hope went to die. The Nazis, obsessed with efficiency and control, had created a system designed to strip away every ounce of humanity from their prisoners. Upon arrival, women were stripped naked, their heads shaved, their belongings confiscated. They were issued thin cotton uniforms and wooden clogs, their individuality erased, their identities reduced to numbers tattooed on their arms. Life in Ravensbrück was a daily struggle for survival. Hunger was a constant companion, gnawing at their bellies, driving them to desperate measures. The Nazis believed in work as a tool of control and systematic deprivation of their basic human needs, subjected to grueling forced labor, their bodies pushed to the limits of endurance. They toiled in factories producing armaments and other goods for the German war effort. They worked in the fields, their bare hands raw from digging and planting. Exhausted women, weakened by hunger and disease, were often beaten by the guards for the slightest infraction, a missed quota, a perceived lack of effort, a whispered word of defiance. It was the systematic deprivation of their basic human needs: adequate food, clean water, proper sanitation, and medical care. As if the horrors of Ravensbrück weren't enough, some women performed without anesthesia or consent. Experimentation. Nazi doctors, driven by a twisted ideology and a thirst for knowledge, saw the camp's prisoners as expendable subjects for their experiments. Women were infected with diseases like tuberculosis and typhus, their bodies becoming living laboratories as the doctors observed the progression of the illnesses and tested the effectiveness of various treatments. Surgical experiments were also common, performed without anesthesia or consent. Limbs were amputated, organs removed, and bones broken and reset in an attempt to develop new surgical techniques and treatments for battlefield injuries. The suffering inflicted on these women was unimaginable. Despite the horrors they faced, the women of Ravensbrück fought to the dying, as the Allied forces advanced to support one another in the face of unimaginable adversity. Acts of defiance, however small, were a way to reclaim their dignity, to show their captors that their spirits had not been broken. They sang songs, shared stories, and offered words of encouragement to one another. They formed secret networks of support, sharing their meager rations, caring for the sick, and offering comfort to the dying. As the Allied forces advanced into Germany, the Nazis began evacuating camps like Ravensbrück, desperate to hide the evidence of their crimes. As the Allied forces closed in on Ravensbrück in the spring of bodies, the haunted eyes, the stench of death that hung heavy amidst the despair. Rumors of liberation spread through the camp, whispered from woman to woman, offering a lifeline to those who had endured unimaginable suffering. But liberation, when it finally came, was a bittersweet affair. The sight of Allied soldiers, their uniforms a beacon of hope, brought tears to the eyes of many. Yet the joy was tempered by the stark reality of their surroundings, the emaciated bodies, the haunted eyes, the stench of death that hung heavy in the air. For some, liberation came too late. Years of starvation, disease, and abuse had taken their toll, leaving them too weak to even comprehend their newfound freedom. But for many, liberation was not a simple matter of walking. Death marches were a testament to the Nazis' cruelty. The Nazis, desperate to cover up their crimes, embarked on a brutal campaign of forced evacuations known as death marches. Prisoners, weakened by years of deprivation and abuse, were herded together and forced to march for miles, often in harsh weather conditions, with little food or water. Those who faltered, who stumbled, or slowed the pace, were shot or left to die by the roadside. The death marches were a testament to the Nazis' cruelty, their utter disregard for human life. For the women of Ravensbrück, the death marches were a final test of their endurance, a desperate race against time. For some captured female spies, the horrors of Nazis' cold-blooded brutality. For these instead they faced a swifter, more brutal end: summary execution. These women, deemed too dangerous to be kept alive, were often shot without trial, their bodies disposed of in unmarked graves. Some were taken out into the woods, forced to dig their own graves, and shot in the back of the head. Others were lined up against walls, their executions carried out with a chilling efficiency that spoke volumes about the Nazis' cold-blooded brutality. For these women, there were no last meals, no final goodbyes, no opportunity to plead for their lives. The darkness of the night often provided cover for these acts of barbarity. Nancy Wake, a renowned British secret agent who unimaginable cruelty, stayed with her long after the war and the brutal fate that awaited captured spies. Known for her courage and resilience, Wake narrowly escaped capture on numerous occasions, her exploits becoming the stuff of legend. But Wake's wartime experiences left an indelible mark on her soul. She saw countless comrades captured, tortured, and executed by the Nazis. The memory of their suffering, their bravery in the face of unimaginable cruelty, stayed with her long after the war had ended. Wake spoke out against the atrocities she witnessed, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow as she recounted the stories of those who had been silenced by the Nazis. They were prepared to give their lives for their country, for freedom. The liberation of Ravensbrück and the end of the war did not. The camp itself stood as a stark reminder. The physical scars may have healed, but the psychological wounds ran deep, a constant reminder of the human capacity for both unimaginable cruelty and extraordinary resilience. For the women who survived Ravensbrück, the memories of their ordeal lingered, a haunting presence in their lives. Nightmares, flashbacks, and a deep-seated fear of confinement were just some of the invisible scars they carried. The camp itself stood as a stark reminder of the horrors that had been perpetrated there. The watchtowers, the barbed wire fences, the crematoria, all served as silent witnesses to the atrocities that had been committed in the name of Nazi ideology. Ravensbrück became a symbol of the human cost of war, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and a poignant reminder of the importance of vigilance in the face of tyranny and oppression. As the shadow of World War II descended across Europe, its very presence, a stark reminder of death, to silence their opponents and instill terror in the hearts of those who dared to resist. Among the most chilling instruments of their reign of terror were the guillotine and the gas chamber, both symbols of a regime that had abandoned all pretense of humanity and justice. The guillotine, a gruesome relic of the French Revolution, was resurrected by the Nazis as a swift and brutal method of execution. Its very presence, a stark reminder of the French Reign of Terror, sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to challenge the Nazi regime. The gas chamber, a more insidious instrument of death, offered no such quick release. It represented a calculated cruelty, a slow, agonizing demise, disguised as a humane alternative to more traditional methods of execution. For those condemned to die within its walls, the gas chamber became a tomb, a place where hope withered and died amidst the suffocating silence. The guillotine, with its heavy wooden frame, its gleaming nightmares of those who lived to tell the tale. To receive the severed head was a spectacle of both fascination and horror. Its operation was deceptively simple, its impact devastatingly final. For those condemned to die beneath its blade, the moments leading up to the execution were a blur of terror and resignation. The thud of the blade as it fell, the sickening thud as it met its mark, and the gasps of the onlookers. These were the sounds that haunted the nightmares of those who lived to tell the tale. Public executions by guillotine were not uncommon in Nazi Germany, particularly in the early years of the regime's reign. The Nazis used these spectacles to instill fear in the population, to send a clear message that dissent would not be tolerated. For the families of those executed, the guillotine represented a double tragedy. Not only had they lost loved ones, but they were often denied the right to bury their remains, their bodies seized by the state and disposed of in unmarked graves. Among those who met their end beneath the guillotine's blade was and subjected to brutal interrogations. Despite the White Rose resistance group, Scholl, along with her brother Hans and other members of the group, distributed anti-Nazi leaflets, urging Germans to resist the Nazi regime. Their acts of defiance, though small in scale, represented a significant threat to the Nazis, who understood the power of words to sway public opinion. The Scholls and their comrades were betrayed, arrested by the Gestapo, and subjected to brutal interrogations. Despite the torture and threats, Sophie Scholl refused to betray her beliefs or her comrades. She faced her trial with courage and dignity, her spirit unbroken by the horrors she had endured. On February 22, 1943, Sophie Scholl, along with her brother Hans and their friend Christoph Probst, was sentenced to death by the Nazi People's Court. Their execution, carried out swiftly and brutally by the guillotine, sent shockwaves through the German resistance movement and beyond. The gas chamber, a slow, agonizing death, dawned slowly, a creeping horror that began with the gas chamber offered a more insidious form of death, one that unfolded slowly, methodically, and with a calculated cruelty that defied comprehension. Disguised as showers or disinfection chambers, the gas chambers were designed to lull their victims into a false sense of security, their true purpose masked by an air of normalcy. For those herded into these chambers, the realization of their fate dawned slowly, a creeping horror that began with the realization that the showerheads were not dispensing water, but with the tightening of their chests, the burning in their lungs, and the acrid smell of the gas that filled the air. The Nazis used various gases in their extermination camps, each with its own horrifying effects. Zyklon B, a cyanide-based pesticide, was particularly notorious for its rapid and agonizing effects, causing victims to suffocate within minutes. From darkness to light, remembering their sacrifice, fighting against all forms of injustice and oppression, reminders of the depravity of the Nazi regime, symbols of a darkness that engulfed Europe during World War II. The stories of those who died at the hands of these instruments of terror, the spies, the resistance fighters, the innocent victims of Nazi persecution, serve as a stark warning against the dangers of intolerance, hatred, and unchecked power. It is our duty to remember their sacrifice, to honor their memory by fighting against all forms of injustice and oppression. Their courage in the face of unimaginable evil must continue to inspire us to build a world where such atrocities are never repeated. Their stories, though painful to recount, must be told and retold, lest we forget the human cost of hatred and the fragility of peace. From the darkness of their sacrifice, let us strive to create a world bathed in the light of justice, compassion, and understanding. Violette Szabo, a courageous spirit stilled. The story of Violette Szabo is one of extraordinary bravery and tragic loss. She joined the British Special Operations Executive, conducting espionage and sabotage behind enemy lines. On her first mission to France in 1944, she supported the French resistance. Her second mission would be her last. Captured by the Nazis after a fierce firefight, she displayed extraordinary courage. Odette Sansom, another remarkable woman who served in the SOE. Her fluency in French and her knowledge captured by the Gestapo and subjected to months of brutalness with her spirit unbroken. Born in France but raised in England, Sansom's life took a dramatic turn when she volunteered for service after the outbreak of World War II. Initially rejected due to her poor eyesight and the fact that she was a mother of 3 young children, Sansom's determination eventually won over her superiors, and she was recruited into the SOE. Her fluency in French and her knowledge of the French Riviera, where she had spent her childhood, made her an ideal candidate for undercover work. Sansom's mission was to work with the French resistance, establishing communication networks and supplying them with weapons and equipment. She carried out her duties with courage and determination, her bravery inspiring those around her. However, in April 1943, Sansom's luck ran out. Betrayed by a double agent, she was captured by the Gestapo and subjected to months of brutal torture. Her captors, determined to extract information about the SOE's operations, used every method at their disposal: beatings, sleep deprivation, electric shocks, and even the threat of death. Noor Inayat Khan, a descendant of Indian Royalty Auxiliary Air Force, and later volunteered for the SOE. The Gestapo, aware of the importance of etching her name in the annals of wartime heroism. Born in Moscow to an Indian father and an American mother, Khan's upbringing was one of privilege and cultural immersion, shaping her into a compassionate and independent spirit. With the outbreak of World War II, Khan, deeply troubled by the Nazis' atrocities, felt compelled to act. She joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force and later volunteered for the SOE, drawn to its dangerous yet vital mission. Khan's training in wireless operation proved invaluable, and she was tasked with becoming a radio operator for the SOE's F section, responsible for maintaining communication between occupied France and London. In June 1943, she was flown to France, becoming one of the first female radio operators to be sent into occupied territory. Operating under the codename Madeleine, Khan faced immense challenges. The Gestapo, aware of the importance of radio operators in the resistance network, were relentless in their hunt for these vital links. Khan, constantly on the move, dodging surveillance and evading capture, displayed remarkable courage and resilience. The stories of Violette Szabo, Odette Sansom, belief in freedom. Ordinary people can achieve extraordinary as spies during World War II are testaments to their extraordinary bravery. They faced unimaginable horrors and death with courage. Operating in the shadows, their sacrifices unknown, they played a pivotal role in the Allied victory. Their intelligence gathering and sabotage missions were crucial. Their legacy lives on, inspiring acts of courage today. We remember them for their courage, integrity, and belief in freedom. Ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. Let us honor their memory by striving for a world of peace and justice. The women we've spoken of today represent just a fraction of those who risked their lives in the shadows of World War II. Many of their stories remain untold, their sacrifices unknown to the world they fought to protect. Some of their names are etched on memorials, their courage recognized with medals of valor, others rest in unmarked graves, their contributions to the war effort lost to the passage of time. But their spirits endure, their legacy woven into the fabric of history. Today, we remember these women not simply as spies, to stand up for what is right and to never give up, symbols of the enduring human spirit. Their stories remind us that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when driven by a sense of purpose and a belief in something larger than themselves. Their legacy extends far beyond the battlefields of World War II. They paved the way for future generations of women to serve their countries in roles once considered the exclusive domain of men. Their stories inspire us to challenge injustice, to stand up for what is right, and to never give up hope. The world remembers their bravery, their sacrifice, and their unwavering commitment to freedom.